26 in Tehillim. And I did, someone gave me, I had some homework last week, and that's Shir Amalos B'Shuv Hashem Eshivat Zion Hayinu Kechomim, the beautiful parak which we say before Birkat Hamazon. And someone asked as to why we say this, particularly before Birkat Hamazon. Why do we say this parak of Tehillim, Shir Amalos B'Shuv Hashem Eshivat Zion Hayinu Kechomim? So I did some homework. The Magen Avram says in the Shulchan Aruch, the commentary in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Orach Chaim, says that it's ra'ui to lid'og l'kedushat ha'aretz. He seems to be quoting the Shalah, the Shnei Luchot HaBrit, and he says it's ra'ui that before Birkat Hamazon, lid'og l'kedushat ha'aretz, to be concerned with the sanctity of our land. And therefore, we say on days when we say Tachanun, we say Al Naharot Bavel, which is the yearning for Tzion, but it's a sad kind of a parak. On the flip side of it is that on days when we don't say Tachanun, on holidays, on Shabbat, we say Shir Amalos, but they're both a similar theme. One is coming from one is obviously Seder Al Naros Bavel, and Shir Amalos is happier, but they both take into account and they both describe our yearning. One with a dream, Azayinu Kechomim, how beautiful it's going to be. It's going to be amazing. And one is Sham Yashavnu Gam Bachinu B'Zachrenu Et Zion Ech Nashir Et Shir Hashem Al Admat Nechar. But they both represent a yearning for Zion, a yearning to return to Eretz Yisrael. And it's the words of the Magen Avram, which he's quoting again. It's Ra'ui Lid'og L'Kedushat Ha'aretz before Birkat Hamazon, and that's why we say Shir Amalos before Birkat Hamazon. It is interesting because the benching is it's about food. It's about thanking Hashem for our food, but it's so clearly connected to our identity and to who we are. The three main brachos of benching is the first bracha is Hazanat HaKol. The next one is Al Haaretz Al Hamazon, connecting our not just the eating and filling ourselves, but connecting it to the Kedushat Haaretz, to our yearning for the land, to the fact that this is our land which produces the food. And then the third bracha, Rachem. It connects it to our greater destiny, where we're praying for Yerushalayim and the Beit HaMikdash and for Am Yisrael as a whole. So it's sort of we capsule into our yearning for our thanking Hashem to our food. Our connection to the land, to Eretz Yisrael, and to our destiny in Eretz Yisrael, which is the third bracha of benching. So benching is not just thank you for the food, but it's much more than that. And Shir Amalos also represents that and relates to that, and that's why we say both Shir Amalos and Al Naharos Bavel before we benched. The custom of saying that people asked about Tilat Hashem Yidaber Pi, those psukim, I just see that it's brought down as a custom. It's not a modern custom. It goes back, but where that exactly came from, I did not see anything in terms of why dafka those psukim and what the significance of those psukim are exactly after Shir Amalos. I'll just mention one other thing before we move on. It's interesting in benching because it just relates to what we're saying. In some ways we we start with Hazones Hakol, and we go to Al Haaretz Va'al Hamazon, and then the third bracha has such lofty ideas about the destiny of the Jewish people. But it always strikes me in benching, in Birkat Hamazon, if you look at that fourth bracha, Rachem al Yisrael Amecha, on Israel, your nation, Vayushalayim Irecha, V'al Tzion Mishkan Kvodecha, on Tzion, on Yerushalayim, Al Tzion Mishkan Kvodecha, Al Yisrael Amecha Yerushalayim Irecha, Al Tzion Mishkan Kvodecha, Al Malchus Beis David Yishikacha, Al Habayis Hagadol VaHakadosh Nikra Shimcha Elokeinu Avinu Re'enu Zunenu Parnesenu Chalkelenu. You give us sustenance. You give us our parnasa. Parnesenu V'Avichenu V'Arvach Lanu Hashem Elokeinu Mikol Tzorasenu. And then we get to V'na Al Tatzrichenu Hashem Elokeinu Loli De Matnas Basar V'Adam V'Loli De Halvasa. And please Hashem, Al Tatzrichenu, don't cause us, don't make us need to go ask for handouts. That we should go for your hand, and we shouldn't have to, God forbid, go begging door to door, or to ask for handouts, or to ask for loans for our sustenance, for our parnasa. It's amazing to me that the benching it goes into these lofty ideas, all these great dreams and vision, but it comes back down to just a few sentences later, it comes down to, and please Hashem, I shouldn't have to go beg for money and ask for loans. So with all the great ideas, we can have great ideas and think about big things and have big dreams and big tefillos, but our daily bread that we have, what we need, we shouldn't forget the little things. It reminds me of the Kutzker, the famous Kutzker that says, that when it says, we say, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, the person, and when they say the word Echad, is supposed to be mitkaven, that he is being mamlich Hashem on all the spheres of existence, all the seven heavens, and all the different things. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, when a person says Echad, they should imagine and think of God as the king who has dominion over every single thing and every single sphere of existence. And the Kutzker says, don't forget that you're also declaring Hashem's dominion over yourself. So we can think about all the great things and all the big things and the lofty ideas that God is a king over this and God is a king over that. But to remember that we ourselves are so dependent and just dependent in every way in our existence, in our sustenance, in God. That's something we shouldn't forget within those lofty ideas. At any rate, that's Shir Hamalos, which we say with those lofty ideas. I want to, which we say before benching. That's the reason we say it before benching. I just want to. I mentioned it briefly, just to finish that up. They have, on one hand, in Shir Hamalos, it's interesting. There is the idea of, and the Malbim expounds on this and says, the idea of God's salvation coming almost as a surprise, b'derech pitomit, and that there's such joy which comes when you don't expect something, and then all of a sudden, wow, you got it. It's just amazing. It just creates a floodgate of joy and happiness. And that's represented in the parak by the term, which I always love, and I love it more moving to Israel and seeing it here with our own eyes. Ka'afikim banegev. People have been on Tiyulim on winters like this, or winter where the rains come and you go down to the Dead Sea area and in the Negev, and all of a sudden valley and a wadi which was dry as bone, and all of a sudden is running with beautiful. Unfortunately, there have been tragedies caused by this as well, but the imagery of afikim banegev, afikim banegev are just sudden streams which come to life in the Negev, and that's what it's going to be, the salvation. And there's a beauty in that the Malbim says, and a joy in that which comes through just a sudden, unexpected joy. On the other hand, there's also the theme of Hazorim B'dima Berina Yiktzoru, that it's something which comes through perseverance and through working towards something. Concept that the Geula will come almost kim'ah, the Gemara says in some places, that things will come gradually in stages. And Hazorim B'dima, certainly, which the imagery of planting with tears and going through a process and living through that process and seeing it lead to the next step, also has a certain fulfillment which is very special. So there's a fulfillment in what the Malbim says as something coming, an unexpected rush of water which creates such joy, but also there's a fulfillment which comes through dedication and commitment of Hazorim B'dima, the Rina Yiktzoru, that those who plant with tears will, through this process, will hopefully be zochet to Berina Yiktzoru, to bring in the harvest with joy, with a kind of joy, not a sudden joy, not a pitomi joy, but a joy which comes through knowing that we worked and we went through and we improved and we did and we became and we earned where we came to. And that's Hazorim B'dima Berina Yiktzoru. And I mentioned it so briefly last time, but I want to say Rav Hirsch, Hazorim B'dima, he goes back and he looks at Shir Hamalot, Hayinu Kecholnim, that it's almost a retrospective of the Gullus, that when we are after the Yeshua, after the Geula, we could look back, now we look back and we say, the Gullus, the 2,000 years filled with all kinds of hardships and terrible experiences and pogroms. It was just terrible and bad, and we want to get out of it. But once it's over, we could look back at it and see it through a different lens, and see that through the Gullus was transformative for us, that the nation, through going through the Gullus, there is, it's not as if we were in Israel and God sent us into Gullus for 2,000 years, and the 2,000 years of Gullus was just a meaningless void. There is a purpose in Gullus. God's punishment is it rehabilitates. It's not just to cast us aside, and for 2,000 years we had no meaning and no purpose, but there is something in the Gullus, just like, it's our belief, just like Mitzrayim is referred to as a kur habarzel, a purifying fire oven, which you put in the ore, the metal ore, and it purifies it from the dregs, from the impurities. So to the just as Gullus Mitzrayim was that, but Gullus that we spent, the Gullus, the last Gullus which we're in, also had something which maybe we'll be able to see and appreciate more after it's done completely, but that there is something in the Gullus that there is something that positive that we got from it, that it strengthened us, that it helped us to become purified as a nation through going through the Gullus. And not only that, but what Hirsch says is, and it's such a nice imagery, that in the years we spent, we were like Johnny Appleseed. We were like planting in all the different nations that we had to go from country to country, but the values of monotheism, the values of Judaism, of righteousness, of kindness, of law, of justice, hopefully is something which we planted Hazorim B'dima. So Rav Hirsch says that, we don't see it and think of it this way, that the Gullus that we went through were years of planting, but the 2,000 years from being thrown out of this country and this country and this country, we were planting in each of those countries, in each of those people, and hopefully planting good things. That really takes us through Perek Kuf Chav Vav. The next two prakim, Kuf Chav Zayin, chapter 127 and 128, the commentaries connect them, and we'll see as we read them. I think we'll see why they're connected. They're actually two beautiful, beautiful prakim. Kuf Chav Zayin, they're both short. Kuf Chav Zayin is just 5 psukim. Kuf Chav Chet is just 6 psukim. But they're beautiful and have, I think, some important thoughts for us. Shir HaMa'alot Kuf Chav Zayin begins Shir HaMa'alot l'Shlomo, and I'll get to why this is attributed to Shlomo. Im Hashem lo yivne bayit shav amlu bonav bo. Im Hashem lo yishmar ir shav shakad shomer. If the Lord does not build on a house, then its builders have labored in vain. If the Lord will not keep the city, then the watchmen have watched in vain. And on a simple level, Shlomo built the house. Shlomo built the Beit HaMikdash. So we understand why this is attributed and connected. It was Shlomo who built the Beit HaMikdash. And even though Shlomo was Zochet to build the Beit HaMikdash, there's a recognition that building a house, you can hire the best kablan, but if God is not on our side, we know that here very well. If God is not on our side, then it's not going, and the project is not going anywhere. That we require completely the faith and the help of Hashem. And Rav Hirsch actually understands this perek as talking, even it refers to Shlomo and it refers to the Bayit, which we right away say Shlomo and the Bayit is the Beit HaMikdash. Rav Hirsch connects this to each individual's building their life and building their house. And he says something very interesting. He says that the song is a song of happiness, but it's expressing the idea which is very, very interesting, because the same idea can either bring a person to feeling completely ill at ease and feeling completely vulnerable, and the same feeling can also bring a person to feel tremendous security and faith in God, and that's the feeling of I don't have control. We like, as human beings, we like some more than others. Some people like to control, but we like to feel in control. We like to feel like we're in control of our financial health, of our physical health, of our kids. We want to control our kids. We want to say, here's what we want you to be happy. Your mother and I want you to be happy, and we feel that you're going to be happy either being a doctor or a lawyer. This is the way you're going to be happy. We're going to tell you how to be happy. So we want to control everything. And the feeling of a lack of control, recognizing that I don't control everything, is scary. That I I'm so out of control. What's a scarier thought than to see, we thought we have control of this, and we realize, and we've seen this in recent times, we thought we have control whether we're going here or going to visit this one or doing this or doing that. And the lack of control is unnerving. It's frightening. But in this, it's interesting to me, and maybe, how the very same feeling of lack of control can be frightening, but it can also, once a person recognizes that I don't have control, then I think even people who deal with addictions, stuff I've read about it, at some point you say, I give up control and I surrender to a higher power. That there's this concept also of recognizing surrendering to a higher power can be tremendously comforting. So on one hand,
let go and let God. That's what they say. Let go and let God.
Very nice. That's very nice. Let go and let God. So that's really what the author here is expressing. Shir Amanos Im Hashem lo yivne bayit shav amlu bonav bo. Im Hashem lo yishmar ir shav shakad shomer. Shav lachem. Shav lachem mashkime. Kum me'acharei shevet ochle lechem ha'atzavim. Ken yitain lidido shena. It is vain for you just to say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get up early. You get up, you stay up late, you get up early, and therefore you are ochel lechem atzabim. What an expression. Ochle lechem atzabim. You eat the bread of troubles. We can understand what that means. You can eat, but it's always troubling, always this. When am I going to get it? What's going to happen next month? What's going to happen now? Everything is shrouded in I don't know what's gonna be, uncertainty. But if you give it over to Yedido, interesting here, it refers to God as a Yedid. Kain Yitain, but it is thus that he gives to his beloved. The Hashem is the Yedid, who is the one who loves us, who offers us. Yedid is like a friend. Interesting, a friendship. Noten kain yitain lidido shena, sleep. And if you look at this word shena in pasuk bet, the end of pasuk bet, you'll notice that it's a very strange spelling. Shena is usually with a hey, shena, and it's spelled with an aleph. And the commentaries don't really explain it. But Hirsch explains it. He says perhaps it's also implied in the word shena. Is it similar? He's very into linguistics, Hirsch, words which sound alike. The word sha'anan. Sha'anan is an undisturbed rest, a certain peace. So it's not just a sleep, but shena with an aleph is a peaceful kind of sleep. And peace. We know the difference between a peaceful sleep and a fitful sleep, which is where we're thinking about the lechem ha'atzabim. And therefore, that if a person has the faith that everything comes from Hashem, and they give up, like you said, let go and let God. I like that. To say it's all from Hashem, and to recognize that, then with that can come hopefully a person a certain being at peace, and recognizing I don't have control anyway. So anyway, as long as I'm trying to steer the boat and I'm fighting this way and I'm fighting that way and I'm going and I'm doing this, I'm sweating and I don't know where I'm going and I'm trying to get to the right place and avoid the rocks. And once I realize that it doesn't mean we should stop paddling the boat. I think we still have to paddle the boat. We're not supposed to just give up and say, well, it's all in God's hands, so I don't need to do anything. But to say even...
My translation says, instead of saying like a peaceful sleep, it says to those who banish sleep from themselves.
Interesting. those who can yitain lidido.
Shena. It's a Matsuda. It just translates Shena like as if it's, I don't know, like people stay up all night learning or something. I don't know what
Yeah. Wow, that's very interesting. That's an interesting way that he's learning the pasuk. It sounds like he's understanding the pasuk more in the vein of the beginning of the pasuk. That people who are just working so hard, eating the bread of it does for them with the first part. Mashkime kum me'acharei sheves ochel lechem atzabim, which is all people who are just working and toiling and thinking that it's their hand and their strength, and that's doing it all. According to that, it goes, those who banish sleep from themselves and just stay up and keep working and are so sold to their work that they put everything into it. But that's very interesting that that's the way he seems to understand it. I wonder, I think I have here the let's see how Mr. Scroll, I don't have it, translates it. He gives his beloved ones restful sleep. So he's more along the lines that Rav Hirsch translates it, that it's a kind of restful sleep, that he seems to understand it. But that's a very, very interesting take on it that you say the Mitsudas translates it to. Just to go on, and he now gets to another thing which can cause a person worries and things that we want to control, and that's children. Hinei nachalat Hashem banim. The children are the inheritance of the Lord. Sachar pri habaten. The fruit of the womb is related. Sachar, it almost sounds like what we say, that children, we say this as grandparents, grandchildren are the reward for not killing your children. But it doesn't exactly say that, but it's the reward for our toil. We have children, and from the moment they come out, they just require work and toil. And yet we love them and we recognize that they're a gift from God. And, it's Nachlat Hashem Banim, Sachar Bri Habaten, and where people who have experienced life, we're not youngsters here, we know that nothing is taken for granted. And people, when my children have gotten married, I spoke to each one and said, don't take anything for granted. You say this, you have kids, I'll have kids then, I'll have this, I'll get, I'm not getting involved, I'm not interfering in anything, but nothing is taken for granted. And nothing is magiali. That we know that, one of the sad realities, especially in our communities, of people of infertility and people who struggle with fertility issues. And, thank God there are so many organizations, and here in Israel there's a value and help available to people. But it's Nachlat Hashem Banim. It's inheritance that comes from God. And it is Kichitzim Biyad Gibor. And as I think a lesson here in child rearing, Kichitzim Biyad Gibor, Kain B'nei HaNe'urim, as arrows in the hand of a mighty man, so too are the children of youth. We want to, as I mentioned before, we want to raise our kids, and we want to make sure they don't make the same mistakes we made, and they make the right decisions. And at some point we realize, talking about, like with God, we say, we don't have control. At some point we realize with our children also, we can raise them and teach them, but at some point we can't control the decisions they're going to make, and we can't control their lives. And the imagery of Kichitzim Biyad HaGibor, that it's like a bow and arrow. We shoot it and we give it direction, but then we let go. So as that's all we can do is pull the string and aim it and try to give it that direction. Kichitzim biyad gibor. If we're really strong, we're strong enough to know that we do our part, and we let go. We just let it go, and hopefully the direction that we'll give it will stay with it wherever that arrow goes, wherever it travels. That the direction will be something which is important. We hope that the lessons that we've taught our children, that we teach our children, are kichitzim b'yad gibor. To me, it's again a beautiful imagery and a lesson in child rearing that we, the vulnerability of having children. I always say, if we wouldn't have children when we were young, I don't know if you're old enough to think about what am I doing. I don't know if we would do it because we all of a sudden, we can undergo that if we go through pain or difficulties. So it's us. I can handle it, but to see our children go through difficulties and pain and is as we all know is a different ball game. And
all I've said over the years is I like to trim the weeds.
Trim
the weeds.
Ah, okay. That's good. That's a good way of thinking also, right? That's what we can do. We can trim the weeds and we can give things direction, but we can't control it. But Hirsch actually says something very interesting, and I wonder what you think about it. It's just a very, very interesting insight which Rav Hirsch says. He says, "Kichitzim biyad gibor kein b'nei haneurim." As arrows in the hand of a mighty man, so are the children of youth. Rav Hirsch says the children that we have when we're young. He says it's easier to be a parent when we're young. Now, that might be obvious. It's easier to get around. And I had a friend of mine who got married a little later, and they came to visit us. This was a number of years ago, and they have the 3 kids, and they're putting the kids in the car seats. I don't do car seats anymore. I just, all the buckles and buckling this in and buckling it this way, the forward, the backward, another buckle upon another buckle, and my wife gets angry. You didn't buckle it enough. You didn't buckle it right. It's not tight. It's not facing the wrong way. And I'm watching this friend of mine buckling these 3 kids, and I'm looking and I say, I'm done with this. I don't know how you do it. But Rav Hirsch says it's more than that. Rav Hirsch says, because the man, I'm going to read a little bit, because the man of the type described here is filled with trust in the Lord, particularly with regard to rearing of his children, he will marry even when he is still very young, and he will refuse to be deterred by thoughts of the inevitable cares and responsibilities that are entailed in this step. He knows that young parents are the ones most likely to succeed in the rearing of their children. In couples who have married young, the gap in vigor and vital energy between parents and children is not yet so deep as it is with older parents. Mutual understanding is greater. Patience and calm, those effective aids in child rearing, are present in a greater degree. There is much more likelihood that such parents will be able to stand by their offspring as sympathetic friends with aid and counsel until such time as the children themselves will be mature and independent men and women. Very interesting. I found this interesting. I had, friends who had children later and got married and didn't have children till they were older. I thought in some ways, I used to say, my wife and I used to say that in some ways they really, it's not like a young couple, you get married at 23 and you have kids right away and they take it all for granted. That somebody who, it didn't happen that way, and they waited till they were 35 or older, they had kids, that there's an appreciation that they had for their kids and which went into their child rearing, which a young parent maybe doesn't have. And Rav Hirsch is giving the other side of the coin, and I guess it's not. That's the way he's explaining this pasuk, that younger parent has the ability to the patience, the calm. I don't know, or to relate more. Maybe you listen to the same kinds of music. If you're younger parents, you're the, once we were all the cooler parents. Now we're not the cooler parents anymore. But maybe the younger parents are able to be the sympathetic. Not that we want to be. I don't think he's suggesting that we're our friend. People, parents say, "Oh, not just my mother; she's my best friend." I don't know if that's necessarily the direction that he's saying exactly, but that there is an element, of course, of friendship is a wonderful thing, and the fact that he certainly, in his estimation, in his insight into this pasuk, that there is an advantage of raising children in our as younger parents. Something interesting. I'm sorry that we're not together. That we can have a little discussion. I'm sure people have what to say. We'll keep those thoughts or discuss it with other people or whatever. I don't want to. It's one of the things I always enjoyed about this shir was that it was not just a shir, and unfortunately it's difficult with Zoom. So, but I'm sure people have insights. I just thought it was an interesting thing to me what he's saying. Rav Hirsch.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure.
Can I just say one thing? As a young parent, I'm not sure that you have so much in the way of savlanut. You want things to go your way, and you want the kids to act the way you want them to. As you get older, and maybe that's what's good about grandchildren, you have much more patience for them. I think you allow them more because you appreciate them, and you're not, you don't have the burdens that young parents have. I'm not sure, that I think there are pros and cons both directions. You may have more strength when you're younger, but I think you have a lot more patience for children when you're older.
Yeah.
So being a younger grandparent, you get to, you have the energy to be grateful for, being more involved in their lives.
I think it's just grandparents have more patience, and maybe not older ones, but it's not so much more fun bringing up grandchildren, than children.
Yeah, that's for
not
sure.
Bringing them up, but helping, doing my thing or doing our thing. It's much more fun than being a parent. You have to be a shofter as a parent.
Yeah.
But as a grandparent, you don't think it's your responsibility as much to the way they're going to come out. It's more of their parents. So you're not in such pressure when you're with them. So it makes it easier too. That you don't feel the pressure of being the one educating your grandchild. Although you have to be an example for them, but it's not the same as being the parent. You're not the one to, to punish or to whatever. And so that makes it easier too to be a grandparent than a
But
parent.
you can let them have more freedom. What happens at Savta stays at Savta, and
right. That's what it's going to be at Savta, because you give them the whatever the parents were not going to give, but it's also their obligation not to give it. The parents were not given to so much freedom.
It's such fun spoiling them.
Oh yeah.
I like Pasuk 5.
What?
I like Pasuk 5. Check out the fifth Pasuk.
The fifth pasuk. Yes, we're just finishing, right. Just to finish the perek. Ashrei hagever asher milei et ashpato mehem lo yevoshu. Happy is quiver. An ashpa we know is like somebody muted me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you please repeat? Somebody
we hear you now.
Okay, you can hear me now, right? Okay, okay. I guess if you didn't like what I'm saying, just tell me.
No, I'm sorry, it was a mistake.
You don't have to mute me.
I will. I'll tell you next time before I mute you.
No.
It was a big mistake. Sorry.
My wife only talks to me on Zoom these days, so she can just mute me whenever she wants. So it's a whole different ball game. Here, ashpa is a garbage, but here it means actually ashrei hagever shemilei et ashpato mehem. fortunate is a person who fills his quiver, like where you put the arrows in, it's called an ashpa also. It doesn't here mean the garbage. You fill your garbage with children. It says ashrei is a person who fills their ashpa mehem lo yevoshu. They will not be embarrassed, ki yadabru et oivim bashar. Even as they speak against they'll have that protection. It's funny that it ends, I'm not really 100% clear, that it ends with the talk of enemies at the gates. Ki yadabru et oivim bashar. But I guess if a person has the family circle, that maybe there's a certain protection that one has with the family also. Rav Hirsch, I mentioned the fact that this parak begins with Shlomo HaMelech, and Rav Hirsch says that it's significant that it mentions Shlomo HaMelech in this parak because it's talking about realizing that everything depends on God and having that faith, and that gives us the security when we can be afraid and when we have the uncertainty. But he says that this, even Shlomo HaMelech, even at the time of Shlomo HaMelech, when there was such prosperity in the nation, that there also, it's one thing to say, I believe, when I don't have anything, I have to turn to God because I'm afraid I don't have anything. But the lesson of even when we have everything, even when things are plentiful, and it's a time of prosperity, but even then to realize that it all comes from Hashem, it all comes from God, is significant.
Can I say something? Sorry, could I just add something?
Sure.
Rashi and Matsuda say almost the same thing. They say, who are the Chachamim? Who are the people who we're talking about? Sorry, who are the Oivim? It's not Oivim of Am Yisrael. It's people who you were discussing Torah with and disagreeing. They're the ones who sit at the gate and talk. And I haven't got much further than that, but it's Oivim l'shem Torah rather than
l'shem Torah. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see it. Interesting.
Rashi says that, and
yeah, Rashi does that theme a lot. He sees things like a lot of the things are talking about Torah, yeah.
May I say something?
Yeah, interesting.
May I say something here? May I say something? If you look at the words before, it's talking about the arrows, like being children, your children. And then it says if you have your package where you put the arrows in full, that means if you have your children, you're full with your children and you come in front of the person that you're going to discuss with, and you also, it's like, and it says the person will not be ashamed. On the contrary, he would be probably proud to bring his family and his sons and discuss together.
Right, yeah. No, I think that it's coming together between what you're all saying. I think that is true. If a person also has their family and their children, and they, it's almost like vet things and discuss things, and it's almost they're not like individuals who can say things and could look foolish and have, whether it's an oyev in Torah or an oyev in ideas. If a person has that family circle to discuss things and to hash out things, that is something which is almost a protection against that. So that could be the idea, which I think is coming out from what you guys are saying. I want to very briefly. The next parak, I don't think there's time because I go late on Rav Reuven each week, and it's not right. He's very punctual. He gets on at 12, so I'm not going to do it. The next parak. Any Yekis in the crowd here? Some Yeki families.
Yeah, not me.
Okay. People who are the next parak has a significance. Ashrei kol yirei Hashem haolech b'drachav yegiach hapecha ki tochel ashrecha v'tov lach, which is a beautiful parak with one of the most beautiful thing at the weddings where they put the talis over the chasam and kala, and they sing this in the real Yeki tune. This next parak Kuf Chav Zayin, which we'll get to Amir Tashem, which will Kuf Chav Ches, excuse me, which we'll talk about next time. I just want to say, I'll say one very quick word, and then I'll go. Rav Hirsch, interestingly, translates, and he talks about the word Ashrei. I don't believe he says it at the beginning. He doesn't say it at the beginning of his Perush on Tehillim. But in these psukim, in these prakim, he talks about the term Ashrei, and he says Ashrei doesn't mean, we generally translate it as fortunate. It's not with an ayin, that it's wealth, osher. It's osher with an aleph, osher, which is Ashrei osher v'secha, fortunate. The Rav Hirsch actually sees this Ashrei, and we'll talk about it next time he talks about it. He translates it as forward strides. Ashrei kol yirei Hashem. Forward strides each one who fears the Lord. That it's the asher darko is to go straight. That it allows us to move forward and to move forward. Certain midot which we have, certain ways of looking at things, help us always to progress and to move forward, which is very interesting. Ashrei is generally happy, fortunate, but here he's taking it as forward strides, all that fear the Lord. We should be zocheh to strive forward and to keep going forward. Thank you all, as always, for your participation and involvement. Have a great week. Shabbat shalom.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, you too.
See you next week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
See you in 2 weeks. We wanted to ask you, Rav Stavsky, one question. Just if you would, they're going to be, since there's going to be classes open till the 14th of July.
She stole my
And they were thinking if we could still follow also with more classes for
I'd be thrilled. I'd be happy to.
Great.
If there are people who are, if you, I'm thrilled to.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's so good. Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank
Be
you.
well.
Thank you, you too.
Stay
Stay
well.
well.
To? What you just agreed to, Moshe?
I agree that you're gonna.
I hope we see you next week.
I'll tell you.
I hope you come. I hope you also come to the graduation party.
God willing. Good Hashem. See you.
Maybe if you pay nicely. Multiple. There you go. Should work. Try now.
Got it. Okay. We are going on a trip. Where are we going to go? We are going to go to, this past week's parsha was Parshat Shlach. And one of the places where the Meraglim started out, the correct word would be the Tarim, was Hebron. So I wanted to go on a trip to Hebron. Truthfully, I have a son who's doing the Madrich Tiulim course, so he gave me some information, but I didn't even know this, that until the 19th century, there were 10,000 people living in Hebron, 10,000 Jews living in Hebron, till like around 1890. And then, of course, we know what happened in 1929. We had a terrible Tarpat pogrom. The Jewish community there was, there were 60 or 70 people were killed, but that basically ruined a lot of the relationship that they have with the Arabs, because many of their so-called friends decided to go against them and to help the Arabs kill their Jewish neighbors. There was a small community that remained in Hebron till around 1936. 1936, there was another pogrom whereby all the rest of the Jews left, and that was it for the community of Hebron until 1968. 1968, Rav Levinger decides to rent the Park Hotel for Pesach with his family and some other people. And the Arab owner of the Park Hotel was happy to get the business. He didn't know it was a bunch of Jews coming to celebrate Pesach there. They kashered everything, and they ended up staying there. The women ended up staying. The men had to leave because of the army. And then finally, that was the beginning of the Yeshuva Yehudi in Hebron once again. So there are a few main buildings in Hebron. There is Beit Hadassah, which we'll see that building, and I'll discuss what happened there as well. Of course, is Me'arat HaMachpelah, which is more 2,000 years old, built by Herod. And we also have what's called Beit Romano, where the Yeshivat Shavei Hebron is housed. And there have been a few purchases of other places. And we also have the Beit Knesset of Avraham Avinu. I spent a lot of time yesterday trying to find videos about all the different places I didn't really find. So we'll take two different clips and see what comes up so that we could see a little bit of Hebron on our virtual trip today.
זמן להגיע לשלב הבא. חברון צריכה למלא את המקום הראוי לה במערך התרבותי והזהותי הישראלי. הקהילה היהודית בחברון מונה כיום כ-800 נפש, עם ישיבה גדולה, ישיבת שבי חברון שנמצאת פה, ישיבה ציונית, כל הבחור.
Right, behind him, I'll go back a second, that's Beit Hadassah. Beit Hadassah was once upon a time the Beit Cholim of Hebron. And it was, of course, destroyed and had to be rebuilt. In 1980, there was a terrible pigua on Friday night, May 2nd. The custom was to also the yeshiva in Kiryat Arba. They would daven in the Mara, and after the Mara, they would go to Beit Hadassah, Beit Romano, and visit the Jewish families there. The Arabs planned an attack there and killed 5 young men. They were opened fire while they were dancing. 20 people were injured, 5 were killed. The Yishuv, if you heard of Beit Chagai in Drom Har Hebron, Chagai Chet Gimel Yud is the initials of 3 of the people who were killed in this pigua. Your cousins were here with, oh, okay, wow. So you probably know a lot more than I do. Wow, okay. Maybe you'll tell us. Go ahead, Yehudi, do you want to tell us anything? Okay, let's finish the video and then we'll discuss that. Okay, let's go on. Where's my...
שנמצאת פה ישיבה ציונית, כל הבחורים משרתים בצבא.
He's talking about the Yeshivat Shavei Hebron, which is housed in Beit Romano.
ויחד עם זה, הקהילה כאן מרגישה שהיא לא נמצאת פה בשביל עצמה. הקהילה פה נמצאת פה כמתווך בין המקום, המשמעות של חברון, ההיסטוריה, החיבור, האבות והאימהות, לבין כל עם ישראל. זה התפקיד שלנו. התפקיד שלנו להוות חוליה מקשרת בין המורשת של המקום הזה, העומק ההיסטורי שלו, לבין כל יהודי.
So the people who live in Hebron, the 800 people or so live there, they feel like they are the shlichim to keep the Jewish presence in Hebron and to allow people without the being Jewish community, they're the ones who fight to make sure that we keep control of the Me'arat HaMachpelah and the other important places as well.
באשר הוא. המקום הזה הוא בית הדסה בחברון, מקום היסטורי וידוע, למעשה היה מרפאת הדסה לפני יותר מ100 שנה.
100 years ago, as I said, this was the Mirpa'ah, this was the Beit Cholim sort of for Hebron.
כאן התנהלו חיים שגרתיים של קהילה יהודית עתיקת יומין בעיר האבות. חיים שלצערנו נגדעו באירוע קשה מאוד בפרעות תרפ"ט ב-1929. ובימינו אנחנו מחדשים כאן את היישוב, ועכשיו אנחנו כבר עוברים לשלב הבא. חברון בעזרת השם תמלא את המקום הראוי לה במערך היהודי, מקום של עיר האבות, מקום של שורשים, מקום של חיבור, שכל יהודי, כל ישראלי מתחבר אליו.
So he's going to discuss about the museum, which we're not going to go into right now, but the Beit Hadassah was mishupatz, had to be rebuilt after 1968, after the 67 war, of course, and there are now Jewish families living in it, and they made a museum. They modernized the museum sort of the way Kfar Etzion modernized the museum in Kfar Etzion after getting some donations and made it into a beautiful video, and the whole area that was redone. So too they redid the whole area in Beit Hadassah, make a beautiful museum, which we'll discuss. Maybe we'll see a few seconds of it, and then we'll go on to the next video.
כאן בבית הדסה הרבה שנים פועל מוזיאון לתולדות היישוב היהודי בחברון, מוזיאון מאוד יפה ומרשים. בשנים האחרונות הורגש צורך לשדרג את המיצג, לעלות לרמה של תצוגה ראויה.
Okay, so then he's going to discuss about the museum. I want to go to see a few more places. Of course, there's the Beit Knesset Avraham Avinu, which I think is going to be in this video. They have a bunch of songs in the background, all the famous people singing. There's a whole interesting argument whether Kohanim could really go into Marat HaMachpelah. There's two different opinions. Some allow them because the Kvarim are all the way on the bottom in tunnels and caves underneath the Me'ara, and some don't allow it. So that's interesting machloket till today.
באלוני ממרא זה לא היה מקרה שאברהם אבינו קנה חלקת אדמה והוא ידע שטוב עשה שתבוא לה השעה שעם ישראל שלו יהיה בשעה צרה חברון עיר האבות שלנו לדורי דורות מאז לעדו לתמיד
which was an ancient Beit Knesset 500 years old, which was destroyed and became a deer, what do you call it? Not a barn, whatever. For the animals, used to put all their animals there, and it was disgusting when we freed Hebron in 1967. Cleaned it up and refurbished the Beit Knesset. They dug down, they found the original Amudim, and they reconstructed it the way it was originally built 500 years ago. They found the Sifrei Torah they got when they left in the 30s. So they took a bunch of Sifrei Torah with them, and they brought them back when they finished fixing up the Beit Knesset. Some of these the Sifrei Torah are hundreds of years old, which are being used once again in Hebron when they daven in this shul.
במשך הדורות חלמנו חלומות לבוא להתפלל על קברי אבות חיילינו נלחמו שם שמיים הם קידשו ובעזרת השם את המערה
לכל תושבי מדינת ישראל, לכל היהודים בתפוצות, להגיע לביקור איזה כיף.
שמוי ויחבו חברון חברון מאז ולתמיד חברון 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 מאז ולתמיד חברון 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 שלנו זכות זכות אבותינו כאשר נשבע לאבותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב חברון מאז ולתמיד חברון חברון מאז ולתמיד חברון חברון שלנו
אשר קידשנו מצוותיו וציוונו להכניסו בבריתו של אברהם אבינו.
And that's the end of our tiyul. People want to, there are a lot of comments going on. Yehudit has some connections. Yehudit, what do you want to tell us about Hebron that we didn't discuss yet?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Drop louder, too closer to the...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we hear you.
So my cousins were one of the first people. They went with Rabbi Levinger. They were there at that first Pesach Seder. And,
1968.
Yep, and they live there to this day. And they had 9 children. And
Lost you.
some live in Kiryat Arba. It was not an easy life. It was not an easy life. I remember Yitzchak Rabin came, I don't know with who now, and they, whatever people feel about Hebron now, they were dancing with Sifrei Torah with the Mityashvim. So if anybody tries to rewrite history, that's what really happened. It was very popular for a while, and then, politics takes over. In the summer of 1971, I lived there, and since I was the only Rivaka, I did all the shopping for everybody. They taught me enough Arabic. I know it sounds ridiculous. I went by myself to the Arabic shuk every single morning. Yep. And I went to buy everybody. It was Benny Katzover and Felix, all those famous ones. And I would do all the shopping because I was the only one that didn't have little kids. I wasn't married. And they taught me enough Arabic to be able to be able to shop for them. And it was the Arabs at that point, this is 1971, they would not look you in the face. So first I would go daven Shachris in the Yitzchak part of the Maras Machpelah, which you can barely get into nowadays. And then I would go straight to the shuk and do all the shopping. And it's, when I tell my kids this story now, they think it's like, it's otherworldly. It just doesn't make sense to them. But yeah, Baruch Hashem, and I hope to do that again one day.
God willing. Okay. Thank you, Yehudit. So that was our tiyul going to Hebron, and we should be able to have many, many more Jews living in Hebron, God willing, and make it once again a Jewish city. We know that there are 4 cities that have a special Kedusha, right? Yerushalayim, Hebron, Tzfat, and?
Tveria.
What's the 4th one? Tveria. Right. Okay. Let's go to our shiur for today. When I was going to sleep last night, I said, I have to change the whole shiur because of next week's meeting. So we'll see where we go with that. We were discussing the bracha of Shechayanu, right? And there was one point that I left out, and that is, and then we discussed it at the very end, just for a few seconds, what happens if you have 2 different types of one fruit. For example, you have everyone sees did I do a share on it? I don't remember if I shared. Am I sharing my screen?
No, you're not.
I'm not. Okay,
we were talking about red plums and yellow plums.
Right, so that's what I want to get into. Let's share my screen. Where are we? Share screen. Come on, share screen. Here we go. Okay. So that's what we're up to. I want to just go over that, and then we'll go over things that are related to our mifgash next week, how that relates to the bracha of Shechayanu. Okay, so here is the basic 3 points about let's say, a pomela and a pomelit, a pomela and a grapefruit. So it says as follows: if you have two different fruits that are from the same family, but they have a different taste and look differently, if they are called the same kind of fruit, for example, tapuach hermon and tapuach ana, or you have apples, so they're called hermon apples and ana apples, there's only one bracha. For example, also ashkolit, whether it's red or it's white or it's pink or it's orange or it's purple, you still only make one bracha of shechiyanu for ashkolit. And the opposite is true. If you have two different fruits, which even if they're part of the citrus family, but they're distinct, they each have their own names on their own, then for eshkolit, make a bracha shechiyanu for each one, eshkolit, pomela, clementina, tapuz, they all get their own bracha. Where is there a machloket? So there seems to be a machloket, for example, when you have a distinct different taste, or it's called differently. I mean, there are different plums that are distinct. They're even slightly different seasons. There's a plum, I don't know what it's called. It's like a green inside, and then there is the other plums that we're eating now. They're yellow and red inside, and so that's really a machloket, or green grapes and red grapes, black grapes. Do you make a shechiyanu for each one? So this is machloket, and because we know that the general rule is safek brachot lahakea, we have a safek bracha, we don't make the bracha, and that would be the point of the machloket regarding the fruit. And for that, we finish our fruit discussion. When I was preparing the shir, so I said, okay, the next thing we should really discuss would be buying things, but because we have, hopefully, God willing, going to be getting together next week and discussing shechiyanu on clothing, I'm going to leave these issues and go and come back to them and discuss really the issue of when you meet somebody. Here, this from this slide on. If we have time, I can go back, or we'll do it in 2 weeks' time. In 2 weeks' time, Aviva is not going to be teaching. I will be teaching. And I said, we'll probably have a Kahoot. Don't worry. It's not going to be a test. It's just going to be a game. Try to review some of the stuff we learned, maybe some of the dmuyot, the people that we mentioned, if you can remember who they are and what they look like. Maybe a picture of the Rambam, if you remember what the Rambam looks like. That's going to be in 2 weeks' time. And now you just corralled me in for other shirim afterwards, God willing. So we'll think of what to do after that as well. Okay, so the Gemara, is there a slide before this? Okay, hearing good news and seeing a friend. So the Shulchan Aruch writes as follows. I hope I don't get down. I hope you don't throw tomatoes at me when we start reading some of this stuff. Yalda ishto, if it's a zachar, if it's a boy, merech hatov v'hametiv, v'gam hi tzricha levarech klen. All right, well, let's go back to one slide, which discusses the difference between hatov v'hametiv and shechiyanu. The Gemara says as follows: Ktsaro shel davar al shelo hu omer baruch shechiyanu v'kiyamanu. Al shelo v'al shel chavero omer baruch hatov v'hametiv. If there's something that I only benefited, for example, when I put on a new shirt, so although it makes me look nice, and maybe my wife is happy to be around me because I have this nice new shirt on, but really I'm the one benefiting from it, so I make a shechiyanu on this shirt. However, if it's something that other people benefit from, which is something which we're not going to be discussing today, but for example, maybe if I buy a brand new car, so my wife enjoys it, my kids, if they have licenses, they enjoy it. So for that would be something you would make a hatov hametiv on it, because it's not only good for me, it also is good for other people in the family. Are also going to be enjoying the new car that I just bought. So that's the difference between Hatov HaMeitiv and the Bracha of Shechianu. And the Shulchan Aruch quotes that exactly. Al Shmuot Shehem Tovot Lo Levado. From here's a good news that is regarding him. He makes a Shechianu. If it's good for him and for others, he makes Hatov v'Hameitiv. So that's the background to get back to the slide that we are in the process of doing here. Where's what I wanted? Okay, so now we go. So that's where if the woman gives birth, and if it's a boy, you make Hatov HaMeitiv. What do you do if it's a girl? So I'll tell you what the halacha says, and I'll tell you what I've heard from Rashat Rappaport as well. So it's brought down. Let's read on, and then we'll see. Agabim imeta ishto. I'm reading the Rama right here, right now. I'm pointing to it with my mouse, if I could find my mouse. Here we go. Imeta ishto chas v'shalom in childbirth. He makes a shechianu because once there's a situation where the wife won't be able to benefit from this new baby, so therefore only he's the one benefiting. The haleka hatava lachrin, because no one else is benefiting from it. V'chein imeta av kodem she'iladato. He meverechet shechianu. If the father dies before the child is born, so then the woman will make a shechianu. V'yesh shekatvu shenahagu lehakel bebracha zo. Some say you don't make any bracha when a baby is born. She'ina chova ele reshut. Because it's not a chova like we saw, where a person eats a brand new fruit, he has to make a bracha. Or a chag, a person has to make a shechianu. It's a reshut. This is a point which we're going to see, which I've been toying with over the past few days, that there seems to be a fear of making shechianu or hatov hameitiv, and because of this Rama and other opinions as well, that there became a minhag not to make a lot of these brachot. We're going to see if that's it sort of goes back to what we were discussing last week versus the emotional aspect of someone being happy for something versus the actual dry halacha, should you or should you not. And it seems to be that there are two schools, and I've noticed after looking into researching a little bit more that I've found plenty of sources that allow shechianu for many different reasons, or hatov hameitiv for many different reasons as well. And not only, because you see in the post-game that whenever you have a lot of these brachot, some say, well, we're not sure, so go get a new shirt, make a bracha on a new shirt, and you have in mind for the baby, or for your car, or for your new house, or for your whatever it may be. But we're going to see, or for your friend which I haven't seen, which we're going to discuss shortly. Let's just read the Mishnah Berurah, and if there are any questions, I'll take them, and then we'll go on to meeting a friend. Perush. בברכת shechianu פני שהיא רק רשות, שעיקר ברכת shechianu נתקן הדבר הבא מזמן לזמן כמו הדין, זה נתפשט שרבים מקילים בכל הברכות וכיוצא באלה. Because the original shechianu was said on a moed, on a chag, or on an object, and not on a good news, not on something which is not nothing physical. A fruit is a physical thing. A shirt is a physical thing. But a news is something you can't touch it. You can't. It's an abstract kind of item. So therefore, some say not to bizenit pashet minhag she'abim mikilim. But the Mishnah Berurah says aval eino nachon. But it's not correct. Because if the Gemara is saying you're allowed to do it, you're allowed to do it, and therefore you can make a shechianu on good news. So going back to this point of the post can bring down that hold your tomatoes and eggs. If it's a boy that's born, you make a hatov hameitiv. If it's a girl that's born, so you can make a shechianu. What's the difference? So it's brought down that if it's a boy, so there's the family benefits more from having a boy than having a girl. So this may have been true at some point, discussed this issue with a bunch of people. I know I've shopped the report and came out and said today there is no difference. You can make hatov amitiv on a girl and on a boy, the same idea. There's no difference between them. And now we have equal rights. Everyone should be happy, and you can do either one if you prefer. You can't hear me? You can't hear me, or you can't hear me? That was an old, can you hear me talking, anybody?
Yes, I hear you.
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, fine. Okay, great. So that is that point. Any questions on what we discussed, Notena, before I move on to the next issue? That's about grandparents I want to discuss. Can grandparents make a bracha when they hear a grandchild? So if no one is going to move on.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, what you were talking about before about the dilemma of whether to say the Shechianu at a bris or not, or a birth. We had that with our son many moons ago, where I think it was more of a day of Ashkenaz minhag versus Sephardic minhag, where the Ashkenazim did not say Shechianu in the States. I'm not talking here in Israel, but in the States, Ashkenazim did not say Shechianu at the Milah, but the Sephardim did. And so I bet my husband went out and bought a new suit for the bris. And he held his lapel and said Shechianu at the bris, because it was very, very important to me and my Sephardic side of the family.
Okay, so now you are really going into a different issue. You're talking about a Shechianu for the mitzvah of Brit Milah. I'm talking about a Shechianu on the birth of the child, okay?
You're not at the bris yet. Okay,
I'm not even at the bris. So in other words, that a person can make a shechianu at the birth of a child, even without having the bris yet. Okay, and they make a separate shechianu on the bris. The people who are afraid, and I'm poking fun, but I don't mean to poke fun. I'm really not poking. People who are quote unquote afraid to make a shechianu will say, "Oh, I'll just make a shechianu on the bris, and that will be yotzi the birth shechianu." Okay, so there are two separate issues here. There is another issue is, do we make a shechianu at a bris or not? And they're correct. Ashkenazim in America, no one makes a brit. No one makes a shechianu. And Sfaradim do. The minhag in Eretz Yisrael is that everyone makes a shechianu at the brit. The question is, why don't we make a shechianu, at least Ashkenazim make a shechianu at a brit in Chutz La'aretz? What's brought down in the poskim is that mishum tsar de mila, anytime there's some kind of tsar, we don't make a shechianu. So why do you make a shechianu in Eretz Yisrael? There's no tsar in Eretz Yisrael, of course, right? The baby's crying for other reasons, not because of any kind of tsar. It's just a minhag issue, and I also know of people who want to make a shechianu in Chutz La'aretz, and they bought a new shirt, tie, a hat, whatever they did to be able to make the shechianu. But here in Israel, there's no question. Everyone is nohig to make a shechianu at the brit. But it's two separate issues. One is at the mitzvah of brit, as opposed to when a child is born. Okay, so is that clear? Are we clear? Tanya?
No, I'm not clear.
Okay, what's not?
So can you make a hatov v'meitiv or a shechianu, or now we make a shechianu for everybody, or you only make a shechianu for a girl and not for a boy?
So there you really can do whatever you want. The minhag, it's brought down clearly to make for a boy hatov v'meitiv, and others say that for a girl should be shechianu. Today, there are many posts that say that the society has changed and women do as much for the family as men do for the family, and therefore you can make a hatov v'meitiv on a girl as well. So that is so. So if you ask you what to make for a child, you can make hatov v'meitiv when the child is born. That's at the moment of birth, or right when, if the husband's not at the birth, when he hears husband's on miluim somewhere and he hears that his wife had a baby, he can make hatov v'meitiv. And there's the separate issue, if it's a boy, to make another bracha of shechianu at the brit.
Do you make the bracha when you hear the news or when you see the baby?
Very good question. some say should be when you see the baby, and unless the husband is not going to see the baby for a while, then he can make it when he hears the news. So it's better to make it when you see the baby, but if for some reason that can't happen, then you can make it on the news itself. Okay? All right, let's see. The next slide discusses grandparents. The Be'er Halacha, which is also written by the Mishnah Berurah, which is written by the Chafetz Chaim. Remember that for 2 weeks from now. Yalda ishto ayin be'Eliyahu Rabbah shehivi b'shem, I forgot who that is, Samachet, dehu hadin kishenolad livno ulevito ben. In other words, that's a grandchild. Or if you have a very, very, very close friend, and they also have a child, you can also make a bracha for them. However, omnam, etc., there is a machloket about this as well. He says, you shouldn't make a bracha tov for every single thing. This is what we learned last week. Even for a new squash, maybe you should make a tov hamitiv if everyone's going to enjoy the nice piece of squash. If someone else is there, if this to enjoy the birth of the son, because his wife was there, if he can make a tov hamitiv. And therefore, he says, "Ulam b'brachaza hu davka b'davar shesh lo to'elet v'ana bo ki yiridat geshamim v'yirushat hakrovim." If a person hears he's going to get a nice inheritance, and if he's the only one who's going to get it, then he makes a shechayanu. If it's a few of the brothers who are going to get it, or his family is also going to make a tov v'hamitiv. So here we find exactly what we talked about once again, this controversy that if you hear good news, and I asked a bunch of people, I said, you're a grandfather, and I'm a grandfather. And when my grandchildren were born, I didn't make a shechayanu, I didn't make anything. I felt happy, I said, Baruch Hashem, but it didn't. And according to the Mishnah of the Be'er Halacha, you are allowed to make a bracha for a grandchild. That is good news. When I keep asking people, why don't they do it? They said, they don't, the minhag is not to, so I don't, but is it good news? It seems there's a story brought down by Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who wanted to make, for whatever reason, I don't know what the reason was, tov hamitiv. And what did he do? He took out a less quality wine, made a hagefen, and then took out a better quality wine, which we discussed the whole wine issue a while back, and then he made a tov hamitiv and had that in mind for the good news that he heard that he wanted to make a tov hamitiv on, which is, once again, it's this fear of not being able to make or not making a bracha for no reason, which you're going to see. I hope maybe today, even the discussion about that, otherwise we'll save that for next week. If we 2 weeks from now, if we don't finish that. So here discussion whether you can make a bracha for the grandchild. And here's a very important point, which this goes back to what I wanted to say, right? Here, Rav Zalman Melamed in the Sefer Pnei Halacha discusses the whole idea of the bracha and maybe making a bracha for a lot of different reasons. Let's read this through and we'll see where we come out. Tachlitan shel bracha. The purpose of a bracha is lehodot or leshabeach laHashem, to praise God. Hamashkiach b'cholei abriyotav, who is constantly caring for all of his creations. Ayidei habrachot anu chozrim v'niskarim. When we make a bracha, what are we really doing? Which we discussed this, by the way, when we discussed the bracha for bread and a while back. When we make the bracha, we are mentioning Shashem eno shochen up in gitzei meramim. God isn't only up in the heavens. Ela kol davar sheyeshno ba'olam mitchiyah mitkayem al yado. Everything that is on this world as well is only exists and it continues to flourish because of Him. And not only physical things, V'chol irua shemitrachesh ba'olam, anything that happens in this world, yesh lo mashmot ruchanit u'megama elokit. That is also God's concern. לפיכך, כשיזכה אדם לדבר חדש ומשמח, when a person gets something that makes him happy, יברך שהחיינו. ואם חלילה, and his חס ושלום יקרה לו אסון, if something negative happens, a tragedy, ידע שגם זו בהסכמה אלוקית. That's also from God. We didn't discuss this, but the Gemara says, כשם שמברך על הטובה, כך מברך על הרעה. וברך דיין האמת. When we're making a bracha, what are we really doing? We're announcing to the world that God controls everything that happens in this world. And therefore, the person makes the bracha, his life becomes much more blissful because he's really realizing the presence of God with everything that he does. Yesh ladat. You don't have to have a tremendous simcha in order to achieve and make the bracha of Shechiyanu. Even a small thing that makes you happy. When you buy a nice new piece of clothing, you can also make a Shechiyanu. When you eat a new fruit. This is a fundamental idea. Many people think lazy, they have to only when they get a tremendous something happens, something really amazing happens, that changes their lives completely. If you have, when you win the lotto and you were poor and lived in a hut, and now you can build a proper house, then that is worthy of Shechiyanu. A person who learns to appreciate even the small smachot שבחייו. להודות להשם עליהם, לומד להכיר את ערכם ועל חייהם שמורכבים מפרטים קטנים, שהתוכן הגנוז בהם גדול, ועל ידי כך יזכה לחיים מלאים ועשירים בתוכן ובמשמעות. Person realizes that even small things, it's because of Hashem, and therefore he can make a bracha on those items as well. Now I'll skip this one, and now we get to when you meet a friend. What's the story? So that's about the news. You don't have to have earth-shattering, tremendous news in order to make a Shechiyanu. According to this, you can make a or a Tov Amitiv, depending if it affects only you or affects the people around you. Anything that makes a person feel good and happy, that could be a reason for Shechiyanu. So I don't know if Seema's with us today, but last week she asked me, in front of everybody, that she got this plant and she was so happy to get the plant, and can she make a Shechiyanu on this? And I really didn't want to say yes, but because I'm stuck in the old school. The old school is that you don't make a Shechiyanu for every little thing that happens. But if a person, according to what we just read by Rav Melamed, if really feels happiness that they got this plant, that they think that this is going to be some kind of a cure, they could make a Shechiyanu on that as well. The whole issue here that it's a subjective kind of thing. And because it's subjective, there were Chachamim who didn't want people to make a Shechiyanu on every little thing. So therefore they said, don't make a Shechiyanu, unless it's something where the halacha clearly says, whether it's a new fruit or a beged chashuv, which we didn't discuss begadim yet. For that reason, some people won't make a bracha on a new car. But according to this other approach, which we're trying to stress a little bit more now, if a person feels joy and happiness, they can make a Shechiyanu as well for other reason. Before I go on to the next slide, are there any questions? Anyone want to open up and say?
Yes,
No?
I have a
Go
question.
ahead.
I put up my hand, but I guess you didn't see it. And I don't mean to be contentious or anything like that. I agree with everything you said, and the truth is that is always the way I learned it. So that's why it's mamash hard and emotional for me to understand, because you said not every little thing gets a bracha, but then you started mentioning things. I simply cannot accept that people don't say a bracha for Hallel on Yom Ha'atzmaut. and Yom Yerushalayim. That's not a small thing. Anybody that went through it saw obvious nisim from Hashem. How could that be less than a new baby or a new fruit or a new outfit? I don't get it. It's something, I hope I don't upset anybody here. It's something that has hurt me, mamash hurt me for years and years and years. It's like saying to Hashem, okay, so you gave us back Yerushalayim, and you gave us back Hebron, and you gave us Yehuda and Sharon and Gush Etzion, but I don't have to say a bracha for the, I don't get it. I don't get it, and nobody, I'll tell you what Beryl Wine told me. I had a correspondence with Beryl Wine. He said a terrible mistake was made years ago, and people are afraid to admit that a mistake was made. And so we just continue it.
I agree with a lot of that. Although, fact, I don't make a shechianu on Yom Ha'atzmaut. I just say hallow with a bracha.
Not shechianu, but I'm saying a bracha or hallow. Ani lo mevina et ze. Lo mevina.
If you remember the video that I showed on Yom Yerushalayim, before it was around Yom Yerushalayim, right? With Rav Goren at the Kotel, when the first time he makes 2 brachot, Shechayanu, and then he makes the bracha of Bonei Yerushalayim, of when he, I forgot what the bracha is, when we recapture a city of Yerushalayim, of Eretz Yisrael. So he made 2 brachot right then and there, without hesitation. I agree. Okay, let's go on, because
I'm not allowed to ask this question. It's like so not PC, and I don't get it.
You can ask it and see what people respond to. What's their response? How they defend themselves?
I know what they respond. I don't like the response. I'm unhappy.
Let's go on to because this is now halacha l'maaseh for next week. Okay. There's a halacha that if a person meets their friend that they haven't seen in 30 days, they make a shechayanu. Let's read it from the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi, if you haven't seen your friend for 30 days, and then you see him, you make the bracha shechayanu. It says Baruch, but you make Baruch Ata Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, shechayanu v'yikimanu v'yan zman hazeh. If it's after 12 months, you haven't seen him, you make the bracha of Mechayei Meitim. The Tosfot Sham says, "Harech harech Hashem shel miyeshechayanu omeri davka chavero hachaviv alav." Only if someone that you love, that you really, really miss, that you enjoy them. If it's an acquaintance that you haven't seen in 30 days, you don't make the bracha. The Shulchan Aruch brings down this lahalacha, haret chaver lachash shemiyom omer shechayanu v'achay b'dchosh shemchayim metim, and brings it down v'hu shechaviv alav, only if he loves him. Harbe, he loves him a lot. The sameach beriyato, he's really, 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 really happy to see him. And the Mishnah Berurah says lachash shemiyom me'riyah rishona. And here we find the very important halacha which we're going to see. V'im kibel mimenu michtav. You got regards from him during the 30 days. A person got regards from a friend during the 30 days, even though he didn't see him, or he spoke to him, got a letter, or maybe even spoke to him on the phone, then according to this, you won't make a shechayanu when you see him after 30 days. Okay? And where are we here? Okay, and here we have the summary from the Sefer of Pnei Halacha of Melamed. Many people don't make a shechayanu when they see a friend they haven't seen in a while. Because this bracha was meant for if you're really happy to see your friend. And he's not, when a person is very hard for them to really know, I'm not really sure if he's my best friend, or maybe he's just an acquaintance. How happy do I have to be in order to make this bracha? Do I have to be 100% happy, 80% happy? Therefore, people are hesitant to make this bracha. בנוסף לכך, in addition, כמה מהאחרונים העלו חשש שאם יתרגלו בברכה זו, people were afraid, the poskim, if we say this bracha a lot every time we don't see people for 30 days, יהיו אנשים שילבו בעת שיראו חבריהם אינם מברכים על המשך חיינו. When then you meet with somebody, the person thinks you're a good friend, he doesn't make a shechayanu, and he'll get insulted. Why am I not worthy of a shechayanu? Aren't we good friends? So people might make the shechayanu so people won't feel bad, even though they're not really so happy to see them. And the third problem is, there are going to be people who like to flatter people, make believe everybody is their best friend, and they're going to make shechayanu even though they don't really care about the person, just so they can ask them for favors afterwards. So this is a problem. But the last paragraph, Ulam lahalacha ein levatel mechamat chashashot elu bracha shektitnu chachamim. We don't stop doing this bracha because of these things that we're worried about. V'nachon nitchazek b'kiyum zeh shemevatet et ha'erech ha'mekudash shebechabrut. This, by making a shechayanu when you see your friend, you're showing how important it is to have a chaver. The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avot, even if you have to pay money to be a chaver. It doesn't matter if you don't know how much of a friend he is. כוונת חכם שכל דם יברך חבריו הטובים. וכל אדם רגיל שאינו סגור מדי, ויש לו חברים שחביבים עליו, אם ישמח לפגוש אחד מהם, שלא ראה אותו 30 יום, יברך. Person, he hasn't seen somebody, he's happy, he can make the bracha. There's people who go to the Shirei Tanakh in Herzog every summer. So there's one of the Rabbanim there, one of the teachers, his name is Rav Yoel Ben Nun. And he always, when he gets up to give his first shiur, he gets up and says, I know there are people who don't make a shechayanu when they see other people, but I am happy to see you all, and anybody who's afraid to make the shechayanu can be yotze with my shechayanu, and he makes the shechayanu even during the 9 days. He says, I'm happy to see all the people who are here, people I haven't seen in a while, I see them once a year, or they come for the Shirei Tanakh, and he makes the shechayanu, and anyone who wants to be yotze with him can be yotze with him, and that's exactly this point. Karovei mishpacha. Gonna get to Zoom in a minute. If you have family you haven't seen in 30 days, if you're happy to see your mother-in-law after 30 days, you make the bracha. למשל, סבא לא פגש את נכדו במשך 30 יום, שמח לראותו, מצווה עליו לברך שהחיינו, וכן אח עם אחותו וכיוצא בזה. כאשר מקיימים מפגש חברים, when you're having a family gathering, או מפגש משפחתי, רבים שם לא נפגשו זה עם זה 30 יום. When you have come to a simcha, you haven't seen your second cousins twice removed in a year since the last simcha, אבל הם חוששים מסתפקים לברך על מי, נכון שאחדים שבוודאי שמח יברך בקורם שחיינו, על יד חבריו ויכוון להוציא את כולם, אף אם הם יענו אמן, ויכוונו לצאת בברכתו, וכך יצליחו למצוות ההודעה והברכה על כל החברים, אתם שהם רואים באותה שסוף. You have at least one person who's happy to make the bracha, he makes the bracha as motzi everybody else. And here, going back to the point which you mentioned before, the Mishnah Berurah said that if you had contact with him, telephone, letter, you don't make a shechayanu. But here, Rav Yossi Rimon writes, it doesn't make sense. According biachas lebrikat mechayim metim, muvan shein levarechem alachat kufay kasher. But the bracha of shechayanu was made, was ordained so that because a person has simcha when they see that person. Not only when they hear about them being alive, when they see them. So he doesn't understand why, even if you got a letter or spoke to the person on the telephone, why shouldn't you make a bracha even if after 30 the 30 days? And that's where Avad Yosef discusses by Kesher telephone. If you had a telephone call, it seems according to Avad Yosef, you should make the bracha when you see them face to face. Because
But if we've been on Zoom,
one more line. Zoom in a moment. I'm getting to that. Ki ikar bracha hi ala simcha biriyat panim. Because you're happy to see your face, that person's face. Next slide. Rav Rimon discusses this exact issue. What do you call Zoom? Is Zoom seeing the person's face, and therefore it's as if I saw him and I don't make a shechayanu or not? So that's what he says. Let's see what he writes. When a person really sees him live, then you don't make a shechayanu. And the question is, in the next paragraph, we have a safek, the Zoom, when he had a Zoom. On the one hand, there wasn't any physical contact. He didn't really see the person. He saw a picture of them. When you have a Zoom, you're ready to have a two-way conversation. So therefore, maybe it is like physically seeing them. So there, and also brings closeness to them. So what's the story? Next slide is your answer. Madad HaSimcha. L'maaseh nireh. Rav Simon writes as follows: Shepashtut hadin levarech. A person can make a bracha even if they zoomed their grandchildren the whole time, and when they see them funny, they could make the bracha. They see a friend that they really, really are happy to see, they can make the bracha. Why? כיוון שהברכה נתקנה על ראייה פיזית ועל קרבה, ובוודאי שהזום לא מחליף את הקרבה. Zoom is great, but we know that meeting face-to-face is still better. מסתבר עוד שעיקר התקנה לברך על ראייה של אדם, שלא ראה 30 יום. הדינים סביב שאלה שמכתבים טלפון שלא ישיר וגם זום, אינם תנאי לברכה, אלא מדד לשמחה. These are all saying how happy a person is. דהיינו, אם היה קשר כזה במהלך התקופה, הרי שמחה במפגש קטנה יותר. In other words, if I had some kind of connection with the person, then maybe I'm not as happy to see them. ממילא אם הקשר במהלך התקופה לא המעיט בשמחה, but if the קשר that we had over the course of the time, even through Zoom, didn't take away from the simcha of finally seeing them face to face, בוודאי אפשר לברך על הראייה הפיזית אחרי 30 יום. Last slide. And I'll take questions. I don't have a meeting today, so I could stay later. לא האמור נראה שכאשר אדם רואה את בני משפחתו שלא פגש אותם 30 יום בתקופת הקורונה, ושמח מאוד בראייתם, יברך שהחיינו, על אף שהיה איתם קשר טלפוני וקשר זום. If you have your family, you didn't see, your grandchildren, your children, you only zoomed with them, and finally you see them, you can make a shechayanu. כאשר האחרים, when you see friends, when you spoke to it Zoom, then it depends. If you're very, very happy to see them face to face, then יכול לברך. בפרט שבדרך כלל כשהם יפגוש קבוצה של אנשים שלהם קרוביו, יהיו אנשים כאלה שלא דיבר איתם בזום. When you have a group of people, not everyone did you talk to in Zoom. On these shiurim, they're great, but not everyone talks to each other. Some people do. ומעל מסתבר שבפעם ראשונה כשרואה אותם בבית הכנסת או בעבודה, יוכל לברך שכיין על כל הקבוצה יחדיו. אך אם פוגש אדם שדיבר איתו בזום ואין לו שמחה מיוחדת בראייתו, לא יברך שכיינו. So it is subjective in a certain way. And if a person feels happiness in their heart, they can make the bracha. If a person doesn't feel happy and they feel, okay, we zoomed and now we're seeing something, it's not a big deal. And here the last paragraph, which is most of us, we don't make the bracha of shechayanu, but in this special situation of Corona over the past few months, then people are even happier than in a normal time to see. ואם כן, ישנה סיבה טובה לברך שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. I'm not going to tell you what to do next week, but there is plenty of sources to say that you're allowed to make a shechayanu when you see. If you want, we can have one person making a shechayanu for everybody, and they all could be yotze, because there is a special simcha when you see somebody they haven't seen in a long time, even though you've Zoomed with them over the course of the past few months. I finished this part of the year. We have another part of Shechayanu, which we'll do in 2 weeks' time, God willing. But if anybody wants to ask, wants to bring something up, the floor is yours.
I have a question.
Yes.
Well, I'm busy with making Aliyah. No, I made Aliyah, but I'm now busy with all those other things. So every time when I have done something, I'm very, very happy, very grateful. Can I make a Sechiana about my bank account, about whatever card? I don't know. So it's just popped in my mind.
When you see how much interest they take away from you, you're not going to be so happy. But
no. That's a different story.
I think that, you know, on the idea of the aliyah, that's could be a shechiyanu, and that includes the bank account and all the other stuff going on. You know, a person being able to, all the rights that a person gets to that come along with when they, you know, there's the buying the car, let's say, and there's also a hanacha, a discount you get for being an ole. And there's all these other discounts that a person, I think it could be included in the aliyah, of the simchat aliyah, and not every single, you know, but it's a great question. Anybody else? Questions?
You made me very emotional. I feel like saying Shechianu every minute of every day. We're just so blessed.
That's exactly what the Chachamim were worried about. You know, if a person's going to, you know, make a Shechianu on every single thing, then they're going to not feel a special reason to make the Shechianu. And that's why people went to the extreme to say, don't make a Shechianu. Don't make a Shechianu on a friend, on a car, on all these other things. But, you know, you have to find that medium, that balance in between, which I think that we don't really have. We don't really have. We're too afraid to make is this enough simcha? Is this 25%, 60%, 80%, 100%? How much simcha do I have in order to make the shechiyanu?
I don't even. I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to say that
finished.
Yeah, no. I most of you know that I've gone through a lot of illness and everything in my life. And I was put on steroids for many, many years. And last week, the doctor removed the steroids. And it was an awesome, crazy, fearful, glorious moment in my life. I'm feeling the pains and the aches now 2 weeks later, a week later, because I no longer take them. But I think that's part of the Shechianu. It's so individual. It's your personal experience. It's
subjective.
One of the only subjective brachot that we have, in my opinion, that is so incredibly subjective. What's happy to me isn't necessarily happy to you. So when I see you next week at the party, and if I choose not to say Shechianu, please don't take offense.
If you don't say Shechianu when you see me, I'll have to think about if I'm going to give another class to these people.
I was going to say
the Shechianu for everybody.
I was going to say that I would suggest that somebody does say the Shechianu for all of us, just because the reason that we are all in the age of being in a higher risk, right? And we all, Baruch Hashem, have been through this safely, Baruch Hashem, and just because of that, just because seeing that everybody's well, I think it's a good reason to say Shechianu.
Okay. Anybody else?
Are you volunteering, Anita?
I'm willing to say it. You also. I don't care.
I guess we can't might see you. Because we're just women, you know.
No, but we'll say it.
A woman could say it also. One woman could get up and say it. But if people are afraid to say it, well,
Somebody could always bring a new fruit just to be sure.
But that's the whole point. I
That
think
you
we
don't
don't
have to.
have to do that. I think we could make the Shechayanu on the actual mifgash itself.
I think so. I think so.
Yes, the first time we'll be getting out together in a class for months and months.
So I
Right?
agree. I agree.
Wow.
Okay. Looking forward to seeing you all next week, God willing. It's Hashem.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Right? And
Thank you.
I hope we have a halacha
Thank you,
l'maaseh
Reuven.
regarding
Thank you
the
so much.
the
Can you just stay
grandchildren
online for a
seeing.
minute, everybody except Rav Reuven? I want to say something.
Yes. Okay.
You don't have to
I'm
go,
gonna
but
leave.
I want to just say
Okay.
something to everybody.
Thank you for recording,
Okay,
Hillary.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me stop the recording.